Psalm 127 goes like this. Unless the Lord builds the house, the builders labor in vain. Unless the Lord watches over the city, the guard stands watch in vain. In vain. You rise up early, you stay up late, toiling for food to eat. And then it says, for while we sleep, God provides for those whom he loves. It's pretty simple and straightforward, right? The corollary of this comes from Psalm 124, which we looked at a few days ago, that if God had not done these things, then disaster would have swept over me. If the Lord had not kept back the torrent and the storm and the wind and the waves, I would be done for. And so that's sort of one part, God preventing disaster and harm from coming to you. And here, it's sort of a similar but slightly different idea that unless God shows up, the things that you are doing, well, they're not going to be the things that they should be. Unless God shows up and walks alongside of you and gives you the strength to do this thing, well, it's not going to turn out well. A similar sentiment is echoed in Jesus in John chapter 15, when Jesus is talking about to his disciples, and he says, I am the vine and you are the branches. He says, he uses this image of him being the source of life, the base of this plant that is growing and spreading. And that the disciples, those who belong to Jesus, well, we're individual branches that belong to this vine. And Jesus says, if you remain in me and I remain in you, you will bear much fruit. So if you stay connected to this plant, this source of life, then the product of it is fruit that's going to be produced. But then he says, but apart from me, you can do nothing. And he gives this image of a branch that just chops itself off and is trying to then grow and be successful on its own. But we know from horticulture that doesn't really happen, at least not in most plants. That if you cut off a branch or a leaf or something and just put it on its own and hope that thing will turn into a tree by itself, it's not going to do that. What's going to happen? It's going to wither and die. And the point here in Psalm 127, just like in John 15, is that unless God shows up in our lives, then the things that we're doing, it's not really going to matter, at least not in an eternal sense. That if God doesn't show up to build the house that you are trying to build, well, what's that house really going to be worth? How long is it really going to hold up? If the Lord isn't watching over the city, then what hope do you think you're going to be able to do? It doesn't amount to much. And here's what this psalm is really about. Do you and I understand that if God doesn't show up, unless God shows up, that we are going to be in trouble? Or do we think, well, I'm actually going to be okay because, I've made plans and I have backups to those plans and I have backups to the backups. So I put myself in these positions where I don't really need God to show up. I can be successful, I can do work, I can earn money, I could go on vacation, I can have a good life, and I can do all of those things without Jesus. I don't really need him. And the similar thing is true within the church community, that often you hear of churches that are growing and doing great things. They have the best preachers and amazing music and these ministries that are thriving. And on the outside, they look amazing, right? There's more and more people coming. But the same principle is true there, that you can have a really amazing church with the best preaching and music and all these things happening, but if God isn't there, what is it going to be worth in the end? What's it really even all about. It's worthless. It's pointless. It looks flashy and pretty, but it's not going to last. That same thing is true in our own lives. And the question here is, what are we building our life on? Do we build our life up so we feel like, well, I don't really need Jesus to come through for me. I'm okay? Or do we put ourselves in positions where we have to have this absolute faith and trust that, God, if you don't show up, I'm in trouble. And the story of the Bible is the greatest moments that you see in humans is that when people do precisely that, they allow them, so they throw their hands up in the air and say, I have nothing without you, God. So show up. And time after time in those situations, God does. But can you and I say the same? How often do you and I put ourselves in positions where we say, God, I'm going to completely trust in you, and if you don't show up, all of my thoughts and dreams and plans are going to fail? Or do we just say, you know what, well, I don't really need God? Which one do you want to be more like?